Hi, everybody. Well, let's start with prayer. God be with me. Yeah. No, my prayer is that we would all hear what God wants us to hear tonight. The title of tonight's sermon is Straight Talk from Katherine, and that came from them. It came from Sean and Chris, I think. And of course, it's in response to Jim's sermon of last week. If you weren't here, he told the story of having to explain to me what tricking was. I've served here at Cathedral of Hope for 2 years now, and when I first came, I was the only straight ally on the clergy staff. And, before I came, I wondered what that would be like, and it turned out to be a non-issue, except occasionally people have to explain to me something. That's okay. In the worship meeting on Monday, just 2 days ago, they started talking about Grindr. And after last week with tricking, I'm going, well, it's just like Match.com, isn't it? Something like that, right? Sorry. Okay. Well, anyway. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about my response, basically, to Jim's sermon. He said that casual sex was okay in a context of dignity and worth and truthfulness. And 3 years ago, before I came here, I would have gone, my God, you think that? Oh my gosh. I would have acted that way. I would have responded that way because that didn't really fit inside my little, middle-class, straight female box labeled morality, right? But my sense of what is moral is changing. It's really expanding, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. It's complicated. Let me give you a little bit of the backstory. In my house, growing up, shame messages were manifold about the body and about being female. And then when I was a teenager, we didn't really go to church when I was growing up, but when I was a teenager, I got saved on a choir trip down in Padre Island, and so began my sojourn into evangelical Christianity with all of its subtle and not so subtle messages about hating the body and hating women, really. So I got a double portion at home and at church, and I have spent my adult years, a good portion of them, trying to unlearn those hateful messages. Yeah, and it's not easy to do. I mean, it was pervasive, so it helps to have a very good therapist, and it helped that I went to seminary, and it helped a whole lot that I spent 7 years getting a PhD in authenticity. I delved into that subject for 7 years. What does it really mean to be an authentic human being? It means a depth of spirituality. It has everything to do with integrity. It has to do with wholeness. And it has to do with being really alive. Well, something happened. I need water. Okay. Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.
Go ahead. Something happened several years ago that sort of brought it all together for me. It was during a spiritual direction group. We were in somebody's house in the living room, and there were 8, 9 of us there. And this one woman, well, at a spiritual direction group, the whole atmosphere of that group is very calm. There's lots of silence. It's kind of quiet, and everybody goes around and speaks about how God is being present to them. And there was this one woman in this group, when it came her time to speak, she really didn't. What she did was she shot up from her chair. She shot up from it, stood up right in the center of the room, and she looked up at God like this, and she went, "I want it all! I want it all! Dear God, I want it all!" And then she twirled around like that. And we were all like, "Oh my God!" It was just, we were all just slack-jawed, open-mouthed, It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She embodied life. She had this passionate embodiment of what Audre Lorde, Jim was talking about this essay by Audre Lorde, of what she called this erotic power for life. And that's what she did. She just stood up there with her arms thrown open like this, so powerful and so vulnerable, so vulnerable. I mean, like this. That is a vulnerable position, to take. It's non-protective. Threw her arms open like that. And every one of us in that room felt it. She made us one. Do you know what I mean? She brought us all in with that action. We all felt this power for life. And yes, it was erotic. It was not sexual, of course, but it was sexuality at its most profound. That experience of oneness that we all felt in that room is really, I think, what this poem by Rumi is about, which I think we're going to see on the screen there. The poem says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas and language, even the phrase each other, doesn't make any sense." Have you heard that poem before? Yeah. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas and language, even the phrase each other, doesn't make any sense. Does that shock you, that there is a field beyond what's right and what's wrong? Tell me. Does it make sense? Okay. This field, it's all about love, the kind of love that we are capable of embodying that makes us all one. The field is about creative power, free from fear. So my friend, as she was twirling around, was in that field. She was in that field beyond right and wrong, and she took us all there with her. Now, when we experience that kind of erotic power beyond right and wrong, we're experiencing what I think is an ultimate good. An ultimate good. This is the gift we have that God has given us for life. This is the gift that God so wants us to know and receive in our bodies. There's no other way to experience it but in our bodies. It's the abundant life that Jesus talked about. And yes, when we are aware, when we're in that space, then rules and regulations and differences don't amount to a hill of beans, because it's all about love. And not warm, fuzzy kind of love. This is not easy. This is fierce, fierce love, because the work of love is to unite that which is separated. It's fierce, fierce love. All right, now you take all that in, and then you put it side by side with what Jim said last week, that there's nothing wrong with casual sex as long as there's dignity and worth. And I think he said something about truthfulness before that. And I was always taught, and I believed, that casual sex is just not right. It's not right. It's not good for a number of reasons. I mean, you could name them. There's a lot of them. Because the heart should be involved. Because sex involves vulnerability and intimacy and relationship. And you can't have a relationship with somebody whose name you don't know, right? But then I hear Jim, and he seems to be saying something so different. He said that pleasure should be valued for its own sake. Okay. Last Wednesday, before the service, before Jim's sermon, Todd was in my office. We were talking, and Jim stopped by. So we asked him what his sermon was going to be about. And in our conversation, Todd said that he had seen this documentary recently about gay sex, the gay sexual revolution in the 70s in New York City. And during this time, they had these huge trailers set out by the wharf or somewhere, and gay men would, I guess at night, they would go to these huge trailers to have sex. And I guess they'd just go in there and have sex with whoever they bumped into, because they couldn't see them. Yeah. I mean, it was dark. They never saw the person's face. Okay. And Todd speculated about how, people might come out of the trailer, and kind of look around furtively, see who had seen them go in there. But Jim's response, and I have his permission to tell you this, Jim's response was, no, I was there. I was in that trailer. That was me. And I came out of there feeling more alive than I had ever felt in my life. So I didn't quite know how to respond to that, It didn't take me long. I remember, I told David on the way home, how that outraged me. It was outrageous that the oppression, the oppression made it so that these men had to, that the society forced them to go into these trailers to find love, to love and be loved. We forced them into this secretive, dark thing, It's outrageous. It was infuriating. Another response I had was how glad I was that Jim experienced that sense of aliveness, that gift of life that God has given us, this ultimate good. Okay, now, I really don't know. I don't know whether casual sex is a good thing in and of itself. I know, it's not for me, but I also know that I cannot judge that for other people. I don't know. No, I cannot judge that. But I do believe strongly that this gift of vibrant aliveness is most definitely an ultimate good, and if we experience that through casual sex, if that is the vehicle through which we move into that field beyond right and wrong, into that oneness where there is no fear, then it is a good thing. It must be. I so related to this Audre Lorde essay that Jim read from. It's an essay on erotic power, but you know what? It's really an essay on authenticity. That's what I saw throughout the whole thing. In this one quote, she's talking about the joy that comes from erotic power, and I think it's in your bulletin if you want to read along with me. She says, another way the erotic functions is the open and fearless underlining of my capacity for joy. In the way my body stretches to music, hearkening to its deepest rhythms, so every level opens to the erotically satisfying experience, whether it's dancing or building a bookcase, writing a poem, examining an idea. Let me stop there for a second. You see what she's saying there? That this gift is available to us through anything, really. It's always there. It's through music and nature and beauty. If we can open ourselves up to this ultimate good, this gift for life, and not go through our lives completely distracted from it, right? So this is one reason why the erotic is so feared, so often relegated to the bedroom alone when it's recognized at all. For once we begin to feel deeply all the aspects of our lives, we begin to demand from ourselves the joy which we know ourselves to be capable. Our erotic knowledge empowers us, becomes a lens through which we scrutinize all aspects of our existence, forcing us to evaluate those aspects honestly. And this is a grave responsibility projected from within each of us, not to settle for the convenient or the shoddy or the conventionally expected, nor the merely safe. Sex is a very complicated thing. We actually need some kind of forum for this, don't we? Not a sex forum, but a forum for you all to be able to respond and tell us what you think about this series and everything. I'll try and do that. But anyway, it's a very complicated, complex thing, and we do bear a grave responsibility to take into account, reflect seriously and long, especially on the power dynamics involved in any relationship, but especially a sexual one, because it's very easy for abuse to occur. That said, sex and sexuality, they're tremendous gifts from God, and we bear a grave responsibility also to not settle for the mundane, to not sleepwalk through our lives, but to appreciate these gifts for the tremendous potential and capacity they hold to enrich our lives. That is my prayer for all of us, that we could approach it that way. Amen.
That was an amazing message, but I don't know if